Hello, this is Cate Stillman here with Dr. Claudia Welch, and we're here to check in and to have a bit of a conversation, and just to really connect us in with the community. I was just noticing we have close to 400 members right now in the Healthier Hormones community, and it's beautiful to just presence, that it started with one idea. And then it extended into a course in a community that's growing and is healthy. And we're here to update the conversation and just connect with you all. So welcome, Claudia. Hi. So I posted a question about what's going on with you guys. What questions do you have for us? And there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there on menopause and on how to know you're on the right track and what happens when everything falls apart. And these are questions we've definitely seen before. I'm sure we'll also see them again. But what I want to do is actually start off with a little bit more about something that's just present, to bring a conversation that is present for me and to some degree for Claudia, and to see also what's really present in Claudia's own thinking and in her conversation. Because I find that it's helpful to get a sense of what else. So instead of just answering the answer like here's a question and here's an answer, is to look more at the larger concepts behind questions. And so a question that comes up, I find often there's a very analytical way to respond to a question, and there's also a much different way to respond that might be, I would say, more about the whole and the theory in which the question's arising than like the actual specifics, like you're going to get the answer right. So my daughter, for instance, she's 7 and she's living in less a right, wrong world. And I'm like, but maybe there's a million shades of gray, and that she hates that. But in this kind of a community where we're grown up and we can hold multiple perspectives simultaneously, which is, I think, a really cool thing about being an adult. We can look at some questions. And so one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is, like, for instance, a student asked me today, like, what do you take in terms of supplementation on a regular basis? And I answered, like, nothing. But on a regular basis, I'm in connection to plants. And those plants come into, we have a relationship. Me and those plants have a relationship, and the more plants that come into my life, the more relationships I have, similar to people, like in not many ways too different than people. And to me, that's a very feminine understanding of how our body works, and it's a fundamental understanding of Ayurveda, and it's the backdrop to when people say, like, I have liver issues, I hear I should take Gaduchi, or I have menopausal issues, I hear I should take Shatavari. To me, that's a very, it's reductionist, it's analytical, and inherently it's a masculine way of being like, that's the problem, and I'm going to plug that problem with this solution, instead of the much more feminine approach, which I believe is inherent in the thinking of Ayurveda, which is like, what's the greatest possible context in which this problem's arising, so that I can really wrap my whole consciousness around it, and maybe in that, in the asking of the question and even the curiosity to think about it, my perspective itself can expand and shift. So that's what I've been thinking about lately.
I love this so much. And one of the things is, I want to ask you a question about this. Do you find with people that you work with, that if you take that approach, do you find that you have to, or at least that you did have to for a while until it became comfortable, have courage to drop the idea that there's a specific physical remedy for this specific physical issue, and to drop that and to just say, I'm looking at this a different way. I'm looking at this in a softer way, in a broader way, in a more feminine way. Do you feel like you have to have courage to do that isn't as valuable?
Because I was taught Ayurveda in a very masculine way, a very much like memorize all these imbalances and memorize all of the solutions. And I'm good at that stuff. Like, not necessarily inherently, but I'm a very focused person. So where I put my focus, I learn. And I would drive back and forth between California College of Ayurveda and the Iyengar Yoga Institute. I just drive back and forth on I-80 every week for different classes. And I recorded all of those problems and all of those herbal and other remedy solutions from Ayurveda into tape cassettes, because that was in mode. And I would just listen and listen and listen and listen and listen until I knew that. And that is how I first knew Ayurveda. I feel like the way that did it take, courage, it would happen for me is the plants started to teach me, is really how I feel about it. Like, I opened my curiosity. I started letting go in different ways, probably from more of meditation or enlightenment type studies. And it started to unravel some of that control over needing to have an answer. And instead I was able to have a question and let the universe answer. Like, let the plants start to teach me and let them start to shift my perspective. So I don't know if it took, maybe somewhere in there it did take courage. I'm not sure. But what I see now is like some structures in my mind had to break down.
Yeah. I'm also seeing that sometimes it takes courage. And for me personally, I'm getting a little bored of the more masculine way of doing things, have been for a while, because, and it's not that the masculine is boring, but that this reductionist approach, like, oh well, I'll avoid this particular food and eat this particular substance and this supplement, and I'll do these XYZ, and that will heal me. I'm just not finding that to be a very interesting, very juicy way to approach things. It doesn't seem to have the transformational oomph that waiting for the universe to answer my question, awakening my own internal sensory apparatus and seeing the answer myself and waiting for the answer and having and practicing listening to the answer, and what does it sound like when the answer makes itself known, and what does it feel like when there's no answer, and do I have the courage to just hang out there and wait? And now it's not even courage, it's like, will I give myself the time?
Yeah.
Will I do it? Will I
Yeah.
do it? And one of the questions I love is like from the posting that you did was somebody said, how do we improve our relationship with God or something? I love that. A lot of the questions were, what do you do about perimenopause and menopause and thyroid and this and that? And I want to bring people back to the class, the Healthier Hormones class, and say, hey, it might be time to listen again, and to maybe listen from a different point of view, not listen for, I want to find the specific remedy for each thing, but really listen for context-oriented material here, because anything involving menopause and perimenopause and life is going to be, in a deepest transformational way, I think, the way to approach it is what is going on in the context of my life. And it's easy to think, okay, well, this little hormone problem will go out of whack. I'll get stress hormones will rise if the context of my life sucks. And then problems will happen. But to really get into it a little deeper than that and see that the context is the life, the relationships, the diet, where we live, where we breathe, how we breathe, all that contextual stuff. It's not the answer to the problem. It's the way to live life. It's the way to have depth in life. We're not doing that in order to not have hot flashes. We're doing that in order to have a rich, magical, meaningful life. And then the occasional hot flash might not matter so much, right? But they may come down a bit too. I'm not being very eloquent with this, but I guess what I'm saying here is a lot of the answers to the specific questions are answered in the context of the class. What do you do about perimenopause? You look at the bucket syndrome and you see, where is that happening in life? and you go back to where that's happening in life. And it might be boring, and it might not be sexy, and it might not be take this herb in 3 parts with this herb in 1.5 parts and a pinch of this, and but it's still going back. It's still going back to the basics. And I've said this in the course and other times, but it's one of my favorite quotes. In Chinese medicine is that the new practitioner has 100 different treatments for every patient that walks in the door, and the experienced practitioner is one treatment for 100 patients that walk through the door. And if there's that one treatment, maybe it might be to listen deeply to the context of our lives, which is to say our lives, listen deeply to our lives, which is to say listen deeply to the internal matrix of our being, because it's a microcosm, it's a reflection, it's a hologram of what's going on in our lives. So listening deeply, I had a consultation with an old time patient recently, and she was asking about a remedy for this or that, and I said, we've seen each other over 100 times. You've been to the most amazing Qigong and Tai Chi and yoga practitioners. You're not a patient, you're a student of life. This is not an answer to find outside. This is an answer to have a relationship with, and have the beauty of your own question. You said you'd have a question that you'd put out for the universe. I did too, and I do, and I love that. And it's like the questions are valuable. Going into the questions are valuable as much as into the masculine sort of, the answer to this question is A, B, and C, and you should take A at this time and B in this dose and C in this.
Yeah. Well, and then I think there's the integrity piece of when we do deeply listen and we hear, how do we honor what we're hearing? I mean, and talk about like deepening our connection to God. Like if we listen and we get a strong message, and that message might be like, cut back on sugar, or like get some more sleep, or say no to these things that you really want to say no to, but you haven't yet, or lose the relationships that are not serving you or anyone else. Or like we hear the messages, right? We deeply listen and we hear, and then do we actually honor what we're hearing so that then the conversation continues? And the integrity, because that's my sense there's like these higher levels of integrity, and we look at someone who's become a master and they're in integrity in different ways than someone that hasn't yet. Because they're in the word integrity is like just to integrate. Like there's more facets of consciousness that are now integrated. And so then some of the symptomology is just going to fall off in that process of integration.
So if we were going to distill this whole conversation down to a nugget, in a sense, I think it would be interesting for this community as a whole to question what is masculine medicine? What does that mean to me? What is feminine medicine? What does that mean to me? And which one do I need right now? And how can I engage that? Right?
Yeah. Or how is it showing up? Yeah. Like how's it showing up? Or what's landing and what's totally just opening some different doors of perspective? And then how does that enlighten the question that was asked? So for all of you who posted, and it's just so great to see, I just want to say we have, I can't even tell how many because it's not giving me a number all of a sudden, but there's like 20 some answers to our posting, our simple thing of like any request, topics, conversation starters. And it's awesome then to just look at this conversation and go back to what you posted and say, how does that shift how you're thinking about that?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I think is going to be a little richer rather than go down and say there was this question and here's this answer. Is let's all go back to anybody who posted a question to go back there if you have a question in your head, kind of going to this masculine versus feminine approach to medicine. And if you're using a masculine approach, what do you think the answer is going to be? And if you're using a feminine approach, what is that process going to be?
Yeah.
And going back to the question from that, and then let's see where our discussion takes us about that.
That sounds.
I'd love to see any of you who have written or want to write, who didn't write or whatever. I'd love to see what you think about that. what does this mean? And I think that without Kate, without you, or without me describing exactly what masculine medicine means and feminine medicine, I think that we each will have our own understanding of what that is. So bringing that internal understanding to these questions ourselves and saying, okay, let's shift even. Is there a way to shift? What can shift here? What can transform here? Just with asking that question in the context of the question you asked.
I love it. And what can deepen, right, in our understanding or perspective. Yeah.
It looks like you've cut out a little bit.
Oh.
So, everybody, nice to be with you. Really nice to be with you. And Kate cut out, but
I think it'll still capture in the recording. Yeah, and we're going to kick off again late January, so stay tuned.
I still can't hear you, but maybe you can't hear me either.
No, I can hear.
My video off, and lots of love to everybody, and look forward to being with you soon.
Yay.